think I should get situated before I start filming, but here we are, not doing that. Hi everybody, my name's Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with book adaptions I would like to see. So the look of my videos is going to change probably over the next few months or so because the sun has gone down. Daylight savings time hit, so the sun has gone down and like it is intense. So no sunlight is available when I come home to film from work. So we are using the lights, which work just great, but we're going to have a generally cozier. I need to get lights for these things. That's dark. That's not why you're here. Hello, hi, welcome. So today I thought I would do a little twist on what usually happens in the book world, which is a book turning into a movie and then like it not going as well. I decided to talk about some books that I would love to see turned into TV shows or movies, just because of one reason or another, but like just I think they'd be really cool to see in like a video format. I've got about 10 books or book series here to talk about. I'll leave everything linked down below, as I usually do if you'd like to know more about all of these individual books, but let's dive in. I'm actually quite excited. I feel very proud of the picks that I have. The first one is going to be one that I talk a lot about on this channel, and that is The Missing Manuscripts of Jane Austen, and this is by Scribd James. So this book is one, like I said, I've talked about it so much. I love it. It's one of my favorite books of all time, and the idea behind this book is that we follow our main character who stumbles across a unfinished letter from Jane to her sister talking about a manuscript, and so she kind of goes on this journey to find the manuscript, finds the house that she thinks it is in, has this guy who's the new owner, and they basically search this house, find the manuscript, and read it. And this entire book is basically just them reading the manuscript, so it's the actual manuscript portions. And I think this would be a really good like BBC TV show adaptation, where it's like not a full series, but you would have like 4 or 5 episodes that would turn into like a movie, like lengthwise, just because of the like switching back and forth from the present day to the past. This I think would be so cool just for like Jane Austen fans. BBC does so many period pieces and so many Jane Austen adaptions, that this being one that's like not a Jane Austen adaptation, but as close as we're going to get to a new Jane Austen book, I feel like this would be so cool to see. I'd also like to think that there could be really cool like transitions when we get to the parts where they're reading the manuscript and you go from like the present day into the past. This will be, like I said, mostly in the past because it is the actual manuscript being told. So I think it would be very interesting to see, just like I feel like there could be some really cool transitions in between those kinds of scenes and then pulling us back to like the present day and stuff like that, because there's basically 2 stories going on. There's the manuscript story and then there's a story between our 2 main characters as we learn more about them, and I just think it's fascinating seeing this. It would just be so good. It could have like the Hallmark movie vibes because it is kind of like a romance kind of movie, but then it has like the period piece vibes for people who love Jane Austen. So I just feel like this would be so cool to see, and I think the BBC could do it justice. Another one I think would be a really good book that could be turned into a movie is The Lies I Tell, and this is by Julie Clark. This is one that I just recently read, so it's at the very top of my brain. I'm very excited about it, but it is a mystery thriller of sorts about a con artist. This one follows our main 2 characters, Meg and Kat, and Meg is the con artist, and Kat, due to some conning like 10 years ago, the repercussions of that situation, Kat her life gets altered a little bit and she blames Meg for that. So she's out on a mission to get Meg, and Meg comes back into their town basically for like one final score, and Kat befriends her and is like, I'm gonna bring her down. She's a journalist. She's like, I've got this. And I just feel like this is going to, there's so many movies out there that have the vibe of a thriller that I think they could turn this, which isn't that scary or suspenseful, into a pretty suspenseful movie, but it's also really girl power heavy. And I know I talk about it all the time, but when I think about this book, I think of the TV show Leverage, and that TV show is fantastic, and I think there's so many great ways to incorporate situations and some of the editing that happens in that show, as far as like flashbacks of like showing what actually happened and things of like that nature that I think could work really well for this story. And they've already got like an audience that loves that show, so I feel like there's an audience for this book, and I just think it'd be really cool to see these two characters on screen. And honestly, while I was reading it, I could just see it being turned into a movie. So I don't know, I just think it'd be really good. Next one is one that I don't actually own anymore, and that is Mr. Penumbrum's 24-hour bookstore. I'll plop it here. I can't remember who wrote it because it's been a hot second. So this is a book that I read a few years ago as part of like a kind of like themed vlog, and it wasn't my favorite book of all time. I think that was because the writing wasn't my favorite, but the idea behind this is really cool. It's like this guy who works in this 24-hour bookstore, and it has to do with like secret societies, but it also has to do with like technology, because a lot of the characters, or at least a couple of characters that are part of the story, work at, I think it's Google, or one of those big, you know, Google-like companies, and so it's got a very tech twist to like books and bookstores and like secret societies and things like that. So while the book itself didn't work for me, the idea of this book, the idea of the secret societies, all of that kind of stuff would work so well, I think, in a movie or like one season series kind of show. But I just feel like the idea of this book is fascinating, and you basically are seeing this guy logic his way through the system of this bookstore and kind of like uncovering a bunch of stuff and figuring out what's going on, because there is a lot of mystery to this book and to the situations that our main character finds himself in. So I just feel like there's so many aspects of the story that would lend itself so well to like a broader audience by making this into a TV show. But I don't know, like, there's something about this feels right. The next one that I think would be a great movie was Honey Girl, and this is by Morgan Rogers. This is a debut romance novel that I read, I believe it was last year, at the beginning of last year, and it is so good because it's a female-female romance, but it does, yes, it came out in 2021. This is so good because it does have that female-female romance aspect, but it has to do with so much more. This dives deep into mental health as well, and I feel like we're at a time now where talking about mental health is not as stigmatized as it used to be. It's still stigmatized, don't get me wrong, but it's not nearly as stigmatized as it used to be. It's more understood to have mental health days and to have mental health situations and get help and things like that. And that's a big conversation in this book. So I think now is a perfect time for this story to go on screen, but it does have its rom-com aspects to it because it follows our main character, Grace, who has a PhD in astronomy, and she goes to Vegas one night or one weekend with her girls and basically like is trying to figure out what's next for her. You know, she's got the big letters behind her name. What does she do now? And then she ends up waking up after a drunken night, realizing that she is married to somebody else. And I think, I'm not sure if her wife's name is Yuki. And basically Yuki invites her to come live with her in New York City. And so it's Grace kind of coming into her own. This does have the vibe of like a coming of age story. So I feel like there is so much potential in this being turned into a movie because I just feel like there's an audience for that. And I feel like it's got all the rom-com vibes and like just the idea of like waking up in Vegas and being married to someone that you don't really know and then just taking a dive and like going and hanging out with that person and trying to figure out if this could be a thing. I just think it's really fascinating. And then of course all of the not darker, but all of the deeper subject matter of mental health and situations like that the characters in here go through. I just think it's so good, and I think there's definitely a really big audience for a story like this to be turned into a movie. I think it's really good. The next one is a little bit silly, but I feel like BBC could do a good version of this one, and that is The Murder of Mr. Wickham, and this is by Claudia Gray. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It follows a bunch of different characters, actually the main characters from almost every single Jane Austen book, and the character of Mr. Wickham from Pride and Prejudice, who is not particularly a good individual. And so he has somehow gotten in touch or connected with almost all of the characters from all of Jane Austen's books, and this is a murder mystery surrounding him. It takes place at an estate, and it follows, like I said, all the characters, but it primarily follows two people who end up becoming like the detectives of this, and that is Juliet Tilney, who is the daughter of the main two characters from Northanger Abbey, and then Jonathan Darcy, who is the son of the two main characters from Pride and Prejudice. So I think BBC has done a bunch of different things like this, like a bunch of murder mysteries. They did Death at Pemberley a few years ago, which was based on a book, and I really liked the adaptation of that. So I feel like there's the market for something like this, and while there's a lot about this that I may not have loved, I feel like they could tweak it a lot. The parts that would work better for screen and just like bring out the murder mystery, because like that is in this book, but it's not the main point of the book, and I feel like when you adapt it into a TV show, you get to see all of the characters that you know and love, as far as like the Jane Austenites of us out there that love all of her work, would love something like this, and just seeing like a murder mystery element to it, and just seeing like, you know, this person that you've hated for so long kind of get their justice, but also figure out kind of what's going on. So I just feel like, based on other things that the BBC has put out there, this would be something that I think would work really well for screen. The next one I think that would be really cool for screen is Mr. Wrong Number, and this is by Lynn Painter. This basically follows a girl who has lost her job, and her boyfriend broke up with her, and she burned her apartment complex down, or her apartment down, and ends up coming back home and living in with her brother and his best friend, and gets a text one night from a Mr. Wrong Number, and basically starts a anonymous friendship of sorts with this Mr. Wrong Number. Turns out it's the best friend slash roommate that she is of her brother that she is kind of living with. He knows, she does not. And it has all of the aspects of a fantastic rom-com. This would be a great Hulu or Netflix original, because they've already done things like The Hating Game, which I thought was actually quite good for an adaptation. And I love that book, and this has those vibes to it. It just has all of the like comedy elements when it comes to a rom-com, as far as like the missed opportunities and the missed number and just all of the funny banter and the text messages. I just could see them doing like a voiceover of all the texts as they're sending them, and you as the audience are like, oh my gosh, like we know it's you. Like it's just all of those parts, and also seeing a girl kind of like come into her own a little bit and really figure out what she wants from life, because she's just kind of like basically had to hit the reset button and figure it all out. So it just has all of the right elements to lend itself to a very well loved rom-com movie. Again, I think it would be a good like Netflix or Hulu original kind of movie, but I feel like this would be so well received by the rom-com lovers out there. The next one actually has an adaptation out there, but it was made in 1945, and I feel like it needs a revamp, and that is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So I feel like with the last couple of years, we've had a few Agatha Christie books that have come out and like a revamped movie format. They're both Poirot novels. It was Murder on the Orient Express and then Death on the Nile. But this one's not a Poirot book. However, with those being so, I think, well received, I think this is a perfect time to do a new version of And Then There Were None. This is my favorite Agatha Christie book. I think it's so well done. And I will say I haven't seen the 1945 version, so that one might be good. I don't know, but I did look into it a little bit. It is black and white, so it does have that old vibe to it. And I think they could really up the suspense with this one and make it into a more modern movie. And it just has all the right elements. It's these people who are on an island that literally can't, like no one in this party can get on or off the island, and they start dying one by one based on this nursery rhyme. And so it just like feels like it would be such a good murder mystery thriller, and I just think it deserves a revamp, honestly, because the other two have done so well. This is the perfect time for them to start making this one as well. I mean, I'm just saying, the opportunity is there. The other two are out, so this one, I think, deserves a revamp. So this one technically is already been turned into an adaptation, but I want a new one. I think this would be really good as a new one. The next one I don't actually own, and that is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I feel like this would be perfect. It does have that dystopian vibe to it because of just some of the subject matter in it, and I think that while the dystopian vibe, as far as like turning YA dystopian books into movies, may have passed a little bit, there's a lot more to this than just dystopian. There's a lot of fantastical elements to this. There's a lot of like extraterrestrial possible elements to this that I feel like, especially with things like Stranger Things right now, there's a market for this kind of story, and it could give you all the nostalgia of those dystopian vibes. So like our generation who grew up with Divergent, Twilight, although Twilight's not necessarily dystopian, but you know, like that kind of vibe. The I Am Number 4, I feel like the Maze Runner falls into that too. Just like that kind of vibe, and seeing them turn, Hunger Games, there it is. Just seeing that whole thing turn into a movie, I think would be great. I've only ever read the first one, and I know there are like 7 or 8, I swear at this point. So there's quite a few, so you would have to maybe dedicate a lot of time to it. So this, I think, could be a really good TV show for something like Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that. Some streaming service to do, because then they can dedicate the time to all the details, which are so important. And that way they might be able to take a couple of books and push them into one, or do 1 season per book or something like that. But I feel like this is like the target words in this video is like there's a market and an audience for a book like this to be turned into a TV show, because of some of the other stuff that's out there that's kind of in the same vein and super popular right now. So I feel like this would be so perfect. Another one I think would be perfect as a Netflix movie. I'm being very specific here all of a sudden. As a Netflix movie and like a coming of age story, and that is Sleeping Around by Morgan Vega. This is such a good book. It follows our main character, Corey, or Corley, who it basically ages out of the foster system and goes to college, but has a lot of situations and like doesn't get along with her roommate and basically sleeps around from room to room throughout her, I think it's her first semester, and it's really just her discovering college for the first time, being on her own for the first time, figuring out what it's like to be, you know, like she's got a lot of trauma, I guess, even though she had a decent time in the foster system, there's still a lot of like mental stuff that comes with that, and so she's dealing with a lot of that kind of stuff. And this is such a good book. Like, first off, if you haven't read this book, you really need to. But I feel like there's a market for something like this, because there's a lot of coming of age stories when it comes to high school. There's not a whole lot of stories when it comes to college. There's a few out there. I have seen a few that are actually quite good. And this has a very interesting subject matter, with it being about the foster care system. I feel like there is a target audience for this, just because of the age of our characters and the situations that they're going through. And I just feel like this would lend itself well to something on screen. It does have quite a lot of almost ridiculous moments, if you will, but also a lot of very tough conversations and a lot of tough subjects that I think could be handled really well and just kind of reach a broader audience. And then like more people will read the book, you know? That's how it works. I don't know about you, but if I see something is based on a book, I'm gonna want to go read it. So I just feel like the story itself would be fascinating for the screen. And the last one is actually the only series on this list, and this is because of how popular Bridgerton has gotten. I feel like this series would lend itself really well to like a Netflix series, kind of like Bridgerton, and that is the Regency Vows series. So we have To Have and To Hoax, To Love and To Loathe, and the most recent one, To Marry and To Meddle, and these are all obviously by Martha Waters. I read the first 2 in this series, but they have that rom-com set in historical time, but it's got all of that like that Bath, London, high society vibe that Bridgerton has, but they're funny, and it's all, each book in the series follows a different set of characters and a couple falling in love, which is obviously what Bridgerton does too. Now the TV show definitely adds a lot more than the books do, but I feel like these could lend itself really well to being movies on Netflix or Hulu or something like that, like a streaming service, or doing like a serialized TV show kind of thing. But because Bridgerton is so popular, I feel like these books would, I don't know, but the first off, they're just really funny. The writing's really funny, and if you could just take the writing from this book and translate it onto screen, I think this could be one of the most humorous movies out there, with all of that fun, you know, Bridgerton, high society, fun costumes kind of vibe. Because I know like when a lot of people who watch Bridgerton for the first time went, oh my gosh, I need more, and like try to find other things like that, this could be a series for people like that who really enjoyed a lot of the aspects of Bridgerton. So this is definitely would be capitalizing on the Bridgerton craze, but I feel like this is a good series and that it would do really well. And that's it. Those are just a handful of books that I have read that I think would be really cool to see in a TV or movie adaptation. Please let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my opinions here, or if there is a book series or book that you feel like would be really good or you would love to see on the screen. I just think it's so interesting to see certain things adapted and see the beautiful stories that we have in hundreds and hundreds of pages, thousands of pages, turned into something on screen that more people can enjoy. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there as well as other fun bookish links, so be sure to check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!